Taoiseach, you are 3 years in office now, and if the government survives a 5-year term, that's 60% of the way. So the shape of what you promised 3 years ago should now be very, very clearly evident to our people up and down this country. And one of the promises you made was that you would be entirely different from the regime that preceded you in the matter of how public affairs were conducted, particularly in regard to transparency and openness with regard to the state and state institutions. Do you agree that 3 years in, your commitments in regard to transparency and openness have been blown out of the water, coincidentally by the creation of the monster that you are responsible for, Irish Water, and how it has conducted itself in the meantime? Do you agree that in the matter of Irish Water and in the scandalous amount of taxpayers' funds that have been allocated to these slush fund-loving consultancies, which have made such a fortune on the backs of the Irish taxpayer for decades now, instead of transparency, you have given the people opaqueness, and instead of openness, you have given a continuation of secrecy? Isn't that the reality of what we face? So would you agree that your fine words and your supposed aspirations of 3 years ago are drowned in the re-emergence of crony capitalism in this state, particularly in the way that private consultancies are able to continue to have transfused to them tens of millions of funds of taxpayers' expense, the detail of which we know nothing about? Now, can you explain and defend in regard to that, please?
Thanks, Deputy Higgins. Well, the situation is entirely different than what this government met when it went in the door of the government. We were blocked out of the international markets. We had no name, no standing, no credibility, couldn't borrow money. We were in hock up to our necks. We had quarterly visits from the Troika. But even you should be glad to know that we exited the bailout programme in December, the first Eurozone country to do so. Even you should have some recognition of the fact that even yesterday 5-year monies were cheaper than in Great Britain for the first time in so many years, and very close to what the American levels are. Even you should understand that the decision by the rating agency Moody's last week has implications in terms of our international standing and our international attractiveness for further continued investment from sovereign wealth funds that were prohibited from considering Ireland for investment because we didn't have adequate rating from the major rating agencies. Even you should understand that the unemployment rate has dropped now consistently for 18 months and currently stands at 12.4% in December of this year. And you may or may not accept the fact that the figures show that 58,000 new jobs were created last year and that this is moving in the right direction. When you speak of transparency, the Irish Water, Uisce Éireann, have been in before the Public Accounts Committee, have been in before the Oireachtas Committee dealing with matters on the environment and finance, and will continue to be so as is necessary. And the Chief Executive, I understand, at his presentation at the PAC, gave a long and detailed and exhaustive presentation on what these services being delivered by expert agencies were actually involving here. But I'll also say to you that you should be aware now that the closed treasure chest that has been there for so long in respect of Section 38 and Section 39 entities is now being opened by this government in terms of full transparency as to what went on. I actually believe, Deputy Higgins, that the current nauseating controversy over CRC will actually result in being very beneficial in future years for charities all over the country, because government have responded. Minister for Justice will appoint a regulator, hopefully before the end of February, that a board will be set up to implement the Act here properly, and that charities that are properly endorsed, that produce annual accounts, that are published on their websites, that are published by the regulator, will have the endorsement of being charities that can and should be supported. And in that sense, we continue to recognise the importance of the service provided by the personnel who work in CRC, by the patrons who use the services of CRC, and by the many people who contribute to that worthy cause. I called out there last week on a purely private visit. I have to say that when you speak to young professional staff who have been devastated by what happened here, and I have to say that the Public Accounts Committee and all the members thereon have been very diligent in the hours that they've spent there, and it appears as if they're going to be busy in the time ahead also. So that's about transparency, openness and accountability, Deputy Higgins, and we'll continue on that mode, because it's in the interest of the people. So it is very different from what it was 3 years ago, and hopefully in the next 12 months you'll see further improvement both in the capacity of the Irish economy to respond in terms of the living standards of people. I note the comments today from the Irish League of Credit Unions that at long last there is a situation where more people are now in a position to save some monies. Not all that we would like to see, of course. Well, if you want to castigate the Credit Union League, then do so. If you want to castigate the Credit Union, like their comment, as I said, is an indication of a position where people are now in a position to save some monies, not all that we would like, because we're still in a very challenging position. But the economic engine of our country is in a very different position than it was 3 years ago, and all of the details of that are fully available to you and to every other citizen, and will continue to be so.